The Chin family Christmas dinner was always held at my parents' house in suburban Houston, a sprawling ranch-style home that my father had purchased after his engineering firm went public. Tonight, 47 relatives crowded around 3 tables arranged in the living room, the smell of roasted turkey mingling with my grandmother's famous dumplings. I sat at the far end of the secondary table, what my brother Michael had jokingly called the kids' table, even though I was 29 years old. Next to me were my teenage cousins scrolling through their phones and looking bored. "So, Rachel," Aunt Linda called from the main table, her voice cutting through the dinner conversation. "Your mother tells me you're still at that lab job?" I looked up from my plate. "Yes, I work at Johnson Space Center." "Doing what, exactly?" Uncle Tom asked. He was a cardiac surgeon, and his tone suggested he already knew the answer would disappoint him. "Research," I said simply. "Entry-level lab work." Mom interjected, her voice tight with that particular blend of embarrassment and frustration I'd grown accustomed to. "She's been there for 6 years now. No promotions, no advancement. Just staying in the same position." "That's concerning," Aunt Linda said, frowning with exaggerated sympathy. "Most people move up after a year or 2. Have you considered that maybe research isn't your calling?" I took a sip of water and said nothing. "She has no ambition," Dad said, shaking his head. He'd been a successful engineer before starting his firm, and he expected his children to be equally driven. "We raised her and Michael to be achievers. Michael's a VP at 32. Rachel is, well." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Michael, sitting at the head of the main table with his wife Jessica, jumped in with his usual blend of concern and condescension. "Rach, seriously, have you thought about switching fields? Maybe tech? I could get you an interview at my company. We're always looking for project coordinators. It's not too late to start a real career." "I have a career," I said quietly. "Lab assistant isn't really a career, sweetie," Mom said. "It's a job. There's a difference." My cousin Sarah, recently graduated with a business degree, leaned forward eagerly. "What do you even do all day? Like mix chemicals and stuff?" "Something like that," I said. "God, that sounds boring," she said, not unkindly. "Don't you want to do something more? I don't know, important?" Uncle Tom set down his fork. "Rachel, I'm going to be direct with you because I care about you. You're almost 30. You're unmarried, you're in a dead-end job, and you're wasting your potential. Your parents paid for an MIT education." "Caltech," I corrected. "Whatever, an expensive education, and you're essentially a lab technician. That's not what they invested in." "We're just worried about you," Aunt Linda added. "You're so smart. You could do so much more if you just applied yourself." I felt the familiar weight of their expectations pressing down on me. For 6 years I'd endured these conversations. For 6 years I'd let them believe whatever they wanted about my work because explaining the truth had become exhausting. The first year at NASA I tried to tell them about my research. About the projects I was leading. About the significance of the work. But every time I mentioned propulsion systems or orbital mechanics, their eyes glazed over. Every time I explained the complexity of what I did, they changed the subject to Michael's latest promotion or someone's wedding or literally anything else. So I'd stopped explaining. Let them think I was a lab assistant. Let them be disappointed. It was easier than fighting for recognition I'd never receive. "Maybe you could go back to school," Jessica suggested. She was a marketing director and loved to solve problems. "Get an MBA. That would open doors." "I have a PhD," I said. "Well, sure, but in what?" Mom asked. "Some specialized thing no one understands. That's the problem, Rachel. You're too focused on these niche subjects instead of building practical skills. Aerospace engineering and astrophysics aren't exactly niche," I said, keeping my voice level. "They are if you're just working in a lab," Dad countered. "Real aerospace engineers build things. Design rockets. Lead teams. You're just, what? Running experiments. Running tests on equipment," Michael said knowingly. "Entry-level stuff. Trust me, Rach, I've hired enough researchers to know the difference between the people who lead and the people who assist. You're stuck in the assistant role." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. "The real issue," Uncle Tom continued, warming to his topic, "is that you lack career vision. You're comfortable being mediocre. You've settled." "I haven't settled," I said quietly. "Then what do you call 6 years in the same position?" Aunt Linda asked. That's the definition of settling. My phone buzzed again. More insistent this time. She's always been like this, Mom said to the table at large as if I weren't sitting right there. Even as a child. Content to stay in the background. Never pushing herself. Michael was always the ambitious one. Remember when she turned down that job at Boeing? Dad added. They offered her a position in their commercial division. Real money. Real advancement potential. But she chose to stay at NASA doing lab work. That was foolish, Uncle Tom agreed. Boeing is a career maker. My phone was vibrating continuously now. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. Priority alert. Is emergency. Immediate response required. Director authorization needed. My stomach dropped. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Rachel, where are you going? Mom asked, irritated. We're in the middle of dinner. I need to take this, I said, already moving toward the hallway. See? I heard Michael say behind me. This is what I mean. No boundaries. They call and she jumps. That's why she's stuck. I stepped into my father's home office and closed the door, already dialing the space station control center. Chin, I said the moment someone answered. Director Chin, thank God. The voice belonged to Marcus Webb, my deputy director and one of the best flight controllers in the program. He sounded stressed, which immediately put me on high alert. Marcus never got stressed. We have a critical situation on ISS. Primary life support system is failing. Carbon dioxide scrubbers are offline. We have maybe 6 hours before CO2 levels become lethal for the crew. My mind immediately shifted into crisis mode. Everything else, my family, their opinions, the dinner, vanished. Right now, 6 astronauts were in danger, and I was the only person authorized to make the decisions that would save them. Walk me through it, I said, already pulling up the secure NASA app on my phone. What triggered the failure? Electrical short in the primary environmental control system. We've got redundancy, but the backup system isn't kicking in. Engineering thinks it's a software issue, but they need authorization to push an emergency patch to the station's systems. That's a massive risk, I said. If the patch fails, we could lose all environmental controls. Aware. But if we don't try, the crew dies in 6 hours. I pulled up the technical specifications on my phone, my mind running through scenarios. What's the crew status? Awake and aware. Commander Mills is asking for you directly. Put me through. There was a brief pause, then a familiar voice crackled through. Rachel, we could use some good news up here. Commander Patricia Mills was on her 3rd ISS mission and one of the most experienced astronauts in the program. She was calm, professional, and very aware of how serious this situation was. Working on it, Pat, I said. I need you to run a manual diagnostic on the backup life support. Marcus thinks it's software, but I want to rule out hardware failure first. Copy that. Running diagnostic now. I opened my laptop, logged into the NASA Secure Network and pulled up the ISS systems dashboard. The data was concerning. CO2 levels were rising steadily. At current rates, they'd reach dangerous levels in 5.5 hours. Marcus, get me Dr. Okonkwo from Systems Engineering, I ordered. And wake up the entire mission control team. I don't care that it's Christmas. We need all hands. Already done. Dr. Okonkwo is standing by. A new voice came on the line. Director Chin, I have the emergency patch ready, but I need your authorization to upload. Not yet, I said. I want to understand the failure first. If we patch without knowing the root cause, we might make it worse. Agreed, but time is critical. 6 hours is an eternity in engineering time, I said. We're going to solve this right, not fast. Behind me, the office door opened. I held up a hand without turning around. Rachel, what on earth? Mom's voice. Not now, I said sharply. Don't you dare use that tone with. Mom, I have 6 astronauts who will die if I don't solve this problem. We'll talk later. I heard her sharp intake of breath, but I was already back in the call. Pat, what's the diagnostic showing? Hardware looks fine. All systems are nominal except the software interface. That confirms it, I said. Marcus, authorize Dr. Okonkwo to begin the patch upload, but I want it done in stages. We test each module before moving to the next. If anything fails, we roll back immediately. Understood. Beginning staged upload now. My family had followed Mom into the office. I could feel them crowding behind me, confused and curious, but I couldn't focus on them. On my laptop screen, I watched the data streams from the ISS in real time. CO2 levels, oxygen levels, temperature, pressure. Every number told a story, and right now the story was that we were in a race against time. First module uploaded successfully, Dr. Okonkwo reported. Running verification. Pat, any change? Negative. Backup system still offline. Keep going, I said. Module 2. Rachel, Dad's voice behind me. What is happening? Working, I said tersely. Is this about your lab work? I almost laughed. Lab work. If only they knew. Module 2 uploaded, Dr. Okonkwo said. Verification in progress. This is Houston, Marcus's voice came through the speaker. We're showing anomalous readings on your backup environmental system. Stand by. Standing by, Commander Mills responded. I could hear the tension in her voice now. Module 2 verified, Dr. Okonkwo said. Moving to Module 3. This was the critical one. Module 3 controlled the interface between the backup system and the main life support controls. If it failed, we'd lose our chance to bring the backup online remotely. Upload in progress, Dr. Okonkwo said. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of my laptop and the crackle of the communication system. My family had stopped talking, sensing something important was happening even if they didn't understand what. Module 3 uploaded. Verification complete. All systems green. Pat, try the backup now, I said. There was a pause that felt like an eternity. Then, Houston, we have backup environmental control online. CO2 scrubbers are active. We're seeing CO2 levels starting to drop. The tension in my shoulders released slightly. Marcus, confirm from your end. Confirmed. SS life support is stable. CO2 levels declining at expected rates. Oxygen production normal. We're good. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Excellent work, everyone. Pat, you're safe for now, but we need to figure out what caused the primary system failure. I want a full diagnostic and I want redundancies checked on every critical system. Copy that, Director. And Rachel, thanks for saving our lives. Again. That's what you pay me for. Houston out. I closed the connection and sat back in my father's office chair. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by exhaustion. Crisis management always left me drained. Behind me, absolute silence. I turned around slowly. My entire family was crowded in the doorway, staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to confusion to dawning comprehension. Did she just say director? Michael asked quietly. I closed my laptop. I need to get to Johnson Space Center. The situation is stable, but I want to be in mission control for the full diagnostic. Rachel. Mom's voice was strange, shaky, uncertain. That person on the space station called you director. Yes. Director of what? I stood up, gathering my laptop and phone. Director of Human Spaceflight Operations at NASA. I oversee all crewed missions to the International Space Station, manage a team of 300 engineers and scientists, and hold ultimate authorization for any decisions related to crew safety. The silence was deafening. But you said you did lab work, Dad said weakly. No, I corrected gently. I said I work at Johnson Space Center. You said I did lab work. I stopped correcting you 4 years ago. 4 years ago? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. You've been the director for 4 years? 5 actually. I was appointed when I was 24. Youngest director in NASA's history. That's impossible, Uncle Tom said. They don't make 24-year-olds directors of. They do when that 24-year-old has a PhD in aerospace engineering and astrophysics from Caltech, has published groundbreaking research on propulsion systems, and spent 3 years designing the environmental control systems currently keeping astronauts alive, I said calmly. And when that person has proven themselves capable of leading complex missions and making life-or-death decisions under pressure. Michael's face had gone pale. The ISS. You're responsible for the International Space Station. Among other things, we're also developing the systems for the Artemis moon missions and the eventual Mars program. Mars, Sarah repeated faintly. When you turned down the Boeing job, Dad said slowly, you said you chose to stay at NASA? I turned down Boeing because I'd just been promoted to deputy director of the ISS program, I said. Taking a commercial position would have been a significant step backward in my career. But you never told us, Mom said. Why didn't you tell us? I picked up my coat. I tried. 5 years ago, I came to Christmas dinner excited to share that I'd been promoted to director. Before I could say anything, you started talking about how I needed to be more ambitious like Michael. You said I was wasting my potential in some lab somewhere. So I stopped trying to explain. We didn't know, Aunt Linda said weakly. You didn't ask, I replied. Every time I tried to talk about my work, you changed the subject or made a dismissive comment. Every achievement I mentioned was minimized. Eventually, I realized you weren't interested in what I actually did. You just wanted me to fit your narrative of the disappointing daughter. That's not fair, Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. Maybe not, I acknowledged. But it's how it felt. My phone buzzed. Marcus asking if I was coming in. I need to go, I said. There are 6 astronauts who need me to figure out why their life support failed so it never happens again. Rachel, wait, Dad said. We should talk about this. We will, I agreed. But not tonight. Tonight I have a job to do. I walked past them through the living room where the rest of the family was still seated at the dinner tables, watching with confusion and curiosity. Someone had turned on the TV and I could see CNN's breaking news banner. NASA crisis averted. ISS crew safe after emergency life support failure. Isn't that Rachel's work? I heard one cousin whisper. Apparently she's kind of a big deal at NASA, another replied. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Rachel. Mom called after me. I paused, hand on the doorknob. I'm sorry, she said quietly. We're sorry. We should have listened. I nodded. Yes, you should have. But we can talk about that later. Right now, I have astronauts depending on me. The drive to Johnson Space Center took 20 minutes. By the time I arrived, the Mission Control Center was fully staffed despite it being Christmas evening. That was the thing about spaceflight. Emergencies didn't care about holidays. I walked into the control room and was immediately surrounded by my team. Director, the full diagnostic is complete, Marcus said, handing me a tablet. We've identified the root cause. It was a cascade failure triggered by a micrometeorite strike that damaged some external wiring. I scanned the report. Odds of another strike in the same location? Minimal, but we're recommending additional shielding on that section of the station. Approved. Get engineering started on the design. I want it ready to go up on the next resupply mission. Yes, ma'am. I spent the next 4 hours in mission control reviewing data, making decisions, coordinating with international partners. The ISS was a joint program with Russia, Europe, Japan, and Canada, and ensuring that every possible contingency was addressed. Finally, around midnight, I was satisfied that the situation was under control. Marcus, you have the control room, I said. I'm heading home. Call me if anything changes. Will do, Director. And hey, nice work tonight. You saved their lives. We saved their lives, I corrected. This is a team effort. I drove back to my apartment, exhausted but satisfied. This was why I loved my job. The challenges, the problem-solving, the knowledge that my decisions directly impacted human lives in the most dramatic way possible. When I got home, I found 63 text messages and 41 missed calls from various family members. I made tea, sat on my couch and started reading through them. Rachel, please call me. We need to talk. Michael. Holy shit, why didn't you tell me you were basically in charge of the space station? Dad, your mother showed me the NASA website. It says you're the director of human spaceflight operations. Is that true? Aunt Linda. Rachel, I saw the news. They're saying you saved the astronauts. I had no idea you did such important work. Sarah. OMG, Rachel, you're all over Twitter. Everyone is calling you a hero. Jessica. Rachel, we're so sorry. We had no idea. I set down my phone and closed my eyes. Part of me felt vindicated. They finally understood. They finally saw what I'd been trying to tell them for years. But another part of me felt sad. Because their respect shouldn't have required a televised emergency. They should have believed me when I told them my work mattered. They should have asked questions instead of making assumptions. My phone rang. I answered. Rachel, she said, and I could hear she'd been crying. Rachel, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know, I said quietly. I saw the news. They showed your picture. They talked about your education, your achievements, your age. They called you one of the most important people at NASA. I am one of the most important people at NASA, I said simply. That's not arrogance. It's just fact. Why didn't you make us listen? She asked. Why didn't you force us to understand? Because I shouldn't have to force my own family to respect me, I said. You should have wanted to understand. You should have been curious about my work, proud of my achievements, interested in my life. But you weren't. You were embarrassed by what you thought I was. We were wrong, she whispered. Yes, you were. Can you forgive us? I thought about that. I don't know yet. Maybe. But things need to change, Mom. You can't just be proud of me now because the world is paying attention. You need to be proud of me regardless of external validation. I want to be better, she said. We all want to be better. Then start by asking questions, I said. Real questions. About my work, my life, my goals. And then actually listen to the answers. I will, she promised. Rachel, I will. We talked for another hour. She asked about my job, about the astronauts, about the emergency. And for the first time in years, she actually listened to my answers without dismissing or minimizing them. It wasn't perfect. Years of hurt feelings wouldn't heal in one conversation. But it was a start. Epilogue. 3 months later, I stood at the podium of the National Space Symposium in Colorado Springs, delivering the keynote address on the future of human spaceflight. In the audience were aerospace engineers, astronauts, policymakers, and International Space Agency representatives. Also in the audience in the third row sat my entire family. Mom and Dad had flown out specifically for this. Michael had rearranged his schedule. Even Uncle Tom and Aunt Linda had made the trip. I talked about the challenges of keeping humans alive in space. About the delicate balance of life support systems. About the split-second decisions that meant the difference between success and catastrophe. About the Mars missions we were planning and the technologies we were developing. When I finished, the audience stood and applauded. But I only cared about the people in the third row who were clapping hardest of all. After the speech, Mom hugged me tightly. That was amazing, she said. You're amazing. I'm so proud of you. Thank you, I said. I mean it, she continued. Not because everyone here is telling me you're important. But because you're my daughter and you're brilliant and you're changing the world. I felt tears prick my eyes. That means a lot. Dad shook my hand, then pulled me into an uncharacteristic hug. We were fools, he said gruffly. Blind fools. We're going to do better. Michael introduced me to his colleagues who'd come to the conference. This is my sister, Dr. Rachel Chin. She's the director of human spaceflight operations at NASA. Basically the most impressive person I know. Even Uncle Tom approached sheepishly. Rachel, I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. What you do is remarkable. Thank you, I said graciously. That evening, over dinner, my family asked me questions about my work. Real questions, thoughtful questions, questions that showed they'd actually been paying attention to my speech. How do you handle the stress? Sarah asked. Knowing that people's lives depend on your decisions? You prepare, I said. You train. You build systems and redundancies. And you trust your team. Do you ever get scared? Mom asked quietly. Every time we launch, I admitted. But that's part of the job. The fear keeps you sharp, keeps you from getting complacent. What's next for you? Michael asked. You're 29 and already at the top of your field. Where do you go from here? I smiled. Mars. In 10 years we're planning to send the first crewed mission to Mars. I want to be the director who makes that happen. You will, Dad said with absolute certainty. If anyone can do it, you can. Later, as we walked back to the hotel, Mom took my arm. Thank you for giving us another chance, she said. You're my family, I said simply. I want this to work. It will, she promised. We'll make it work. And standing there under the Colorado stars, thinking about the astronauts orbiting overhead and the Mars missions yet to come, I believed her. Sometimes people need to see you through others' eyes before they can truly see you themselves. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't fair. But it was human. And if my family could learn and grow and change, well, that was its own kind of rocket science. The kind that required patience, persistence, and the belief that even the most difficult trajectories could be corrected with the right calculations and enough determination. After all, I'd kept 6 astronauts alive in the vacuum of space. Surely I could navigate one complicated family.